Alright, so I'm going to show you guys if you ever wanted to like comp like this little pop figure that I made onto a background. In this case, I have this like weird picture of my 3D printer workspace that I just took with my phone. I emailed it to myself so that it wouldn't get like super compressed on Facebook or anything like that. And then I just went through and this is just like, in my opinion, makes life easier. But I cropped the image to a 16:9 aspect ratio so that I can keep this image like, it's just easier to work with, I think, when you're setting things up. If it's just a one-off and you know that this is like the exact part of the picture or whatever that you want to use, I'd say just go for this. You can also go back in and just sort of like tweak it later if you need to. But anywho, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a new camera. So create camera, and you can see that it's added a little perspective camera down here in the origin. If you go up here to panels, perspective, you can select camera 1, and I am now in the camera and moving that around. I'm going to call this render cam. So this is my render cam. Yay. Next thing I'm going to do is set up go to view, camera settings, and turn on a resolution gate. And this will just show me basically the area that will be rendered. Anything grayed out is not going to render. It'll also tell you what size the renders are or will be up here. In this case, it's the wrong size, but it's the right aspect ratio, so I'm just going to like leave it and call it a day. Better for test rendering anyway. The next thing I'm going to do is throw in an image plane. So I'm just going to go, again, to View, Image Plane, and Import Image. Same thing you would do if you were bringing in like an orthographic or something like that. Now you can say that it tacks this image plane onto my my render cam. It's also basically obliterated my figure. So you'll notice that like if I zoom in and out, my figure basically appears and disappears sporadically into the background here. My fix for that is just see right here where it says depth in your attribute editor, just like add an extra 0, and then you can scroll in, go as far out, and it's not gonna, it basically moves the image plane farther away from the camera so that it's not gonna clip through and get rid of half of your models. So the other thing that I usually do, if it doesn't do this automatically, because I cropped my image, it does, which is, again, why I think it's just easier to crop your image. But you could select for fit, do best, you can select horizontal, vertical, whatever. And then you can also, so pick whichever option makes sense for you, and then you can select fit to resolution gate, and that'll basically just like squish your image into your resolution gate, which, like I said, if this is the right aspect ratio, then it should be fine and like squish in without being stretched really weird. So you can see that now I have this sort of figure sort of superimposed in here. And if you're looking at this image, so like, you know, you could just sort of position your figure and like render it and hope that it works. But it's going to look really, really weird because there's not going to be any shadowing like on this printer box here, because it's only, the only thing actually really in this Maya scene is like this figure here. So if you want the shadows, it's a good idea to actually go in and add a little bit of extra geometry into your scene so that you will have shadows that you can basically add back into your background layer later. So you can see I've already started blocking in. I just made this like weird little box here. And pretty, like, literally just a standard cube. I'm just looking for something that I can roughly match the shape of this box against. And then I just moved the pivot up to the top of this box, mostly so I can easily go through and scale it without having to reposition it at the bottom of this figure. So I'm just going to fiddle around, and I'll try to maybe, usually the approach that I take is to try to match up the side where there's going to be the most shadows. In this case, I'm only comping one thing in. The shadows are going to be over on this side, so I'm going to make sure that this lines up more closely. Because if it's like this, the shadows are basically going to stop here, and it's going to be really, really, pretty much almost impossible to comp that into the original scene. But you'll notice, like, even though my printer box is a perfect square, or a perfect rectangle, I should say, this is a perfect rectangle, And you can see that it's like really not quite matching up with the image. So there's a few ways to fix this. The worst way, which I will never recommend, is to just manually modify the box so that it looks like it fits. Which, again, perspective-wise, like it looks like it fits the top of this box, but if I go back into my perspective camera, you will see that this is like the least rectangular thing ever. Not that this won't work for what we're doing, it's just like horrible practice. Like it's really bad practice to do that. So I incidentally do not recommend doing that. Alright. So we'd actually probably want to play with. So cameras have like different focal lengths and apertures and like all this other stuff. And if you go into your attribute editor, you can actually edit the focal length and all that good stuff. So if I like tweak this focal length, you know, you can see that I'm not moving my camera, it just changes how the stuff in frame is being displayed. And if I can also change like the angle of view. Cool. I have been paid for a freelance job. But yeah, so I might set this to something like, I don't know. Grr. No. Alright. I give up. So I think I found when I did this previously that like something like 25 and then like, a field of view like this was like not totally horrible. It also seems like I'm having trouble matching the cameras or like the rotation, so I'm just gonna manually plug in maybe like -4 into that rotation. You can see that the front angle of this now matches up a little bit better. But yeah, so I mean you would just basically go in and play with that until you had something that matched pretty accurately. I actually did this before and I accidentally recorded the scene without audio, so I'm just going to go back to that file, which is render start, continue, huzzah. So you can see that I have, I think, what did the settings actually come out to be? This is like just trying to match an iPhone camera. It was like 24 and then like 71 for the angle of view. To be honest, it's been a while since I've worked with real world cameras, so this is probably like completely inaccurate, but it matches for like the main part of the scene that I want the figure sitting on, which is this little box here. The other things I've gone through and done is I angled the front of the box slightly because the actual printer does have like an angled front to it. There's like a little knob here, but you can't see that, so whatever. I've also gone in and just very roughly added in some extra geometry, like extra little printer boxes and stuff like that. Added in like the Pocky box, just in case the shadow actually does extend over there. If it does, I'll go back and tweak those more aggressively, but for now, meh. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did. The other thing that I did, because I want, and there's other ways to do this, I just find this to be the simplest way, because I like being able to just like stay in my render cam and then go back in and like tweak stuff and then just, you know, zip back to my correct angle. Is actually just keyframe the camera itself. So if you select the camera, go to whatever frame you want to key, it really doesn't matter for this, and you press S, it'll basically keyframe everything. So like every, you know, translate, rotate, scale value, visibility, that's all going to be keyed. So I keyframed frame 20. You can see that it's denoted by this little red line here. And it also shows me, like, anything that's keyed has this, like, little red bar next to it. So if I go to something like frame 15, you can see that there's no little red line saying that there's a keyframe here, so no keyframe on 15. These little lines are pink, and basically what that says is these values are keyframed, just not on this particular frame. Which it actually apparently tells you on the little, if you hover over that pink bar, which is kind of funny. Weird. Okay, I've literally never tried that before. But basically what this allows me to do is, you know, scroll around as much as I want, and then as soon as I select a different frame, it's going to snap that camera back to the position that it was in. The only thing you want to make sure of is that this little auto key button down here is turned off. If this is turned on, anytime you make a change to the camera view, so like if I go like this, it's going to add a keyframe because I've changed a bunch of these values. You can see that it automatically went in and changed a bunch of translation and rotation values because that's just what I changed when doing the keyframe. So if you do that over your original frame, it'll like get rid of your keyframes, which is not ideal, obviously. But yeah, so I mean that's how you would normally just like set up the scene, is like add in main geometry, or if there's like, you know, a big stick here or something, I might want to add that in so that it would appropriately cast a shadow over my piece once I added light. So once that's done, I would basically just go in and maybe add a little bit of random lighting into here. I'm actually gonna, because I'm doing this on, ooh, bad. Since I'm doing this on my laptop, I'm gonna set this to be a much smaller image to render so it doesn't take quite as long. So the first thing I'm going to do, there's like a huge window on the side of the room. I'm probably just going to go in to maybe back into my perspective camera for now. I think it'll be easier to add in. You see, here's my camera, and if I shift the camera around, it's going to move the image plane as well because that's attached to this camera. But anywho, so I'm just going to run in and throw in an Arnold light really quick. I'll just do a giant area light. Which I want, this is like, should theoretically be 90 degrees from my, 90 degrees from my little pop figure thing here. So I'll just move that somewhere, hopefully that's off frame. And I'm going to, I do want this as a quad. I'm going to go in, there should be somewhere where I can set the, it's been a while since I've actually had to change the shape of the light. Blah, 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 diffuse specular. You can scale lights, but that's like really not a great shape to do. There should be, 100% should be like a area for light stuff. I'm sure I was going to pause the recording, that'd be great. I can just go Google it. Alright, for now I'm just going to throw in the light. It's actually just really bothering me that I can't figure out where this is. Translate, scale, rotate, shear, pivots, display? No. Alright, anywho, I'm just going to go in and I will make this intensity something more like 1000 and see what exactly that does to my scene. So I'm going to go back into my render cam and just pull up the Arnold render view. I will start that rendering. Perfect. It would seem as if I should... Hey, I have a really ugly render. Great. And you can see that it's rendering my image plane. You can actually turn that off if you don't want it to show up. But in this case, I'm probably actually just going to leave it here. And I will just brighten this aggressively until it feels maybe a little bit more accurate with the rest of my stuff. Okay, so you can see here that the shadow does actually go all the way across like this Pocky box and maybe a little bit over here. So I'm actually going to go back in once I'm done and add a little bit more geometry into that later and match that more accurately to the shape of things. Cool. So I think I'm actually going to, now that I look at this, I'm actually going to take the figure and just rotate it slightly because I don't really like the way that the... Alright, what if I actually just shift this area light over so it's a little bit more forward and a little bit more up. And again, so I'm just going to click on frame 20 and it pops me back right to where I need to be. Actually feels really as a weird position for the light. So I'm just sort of like trying to match it up. I'm looking at where the shadows are. So like, there's really actually not a lot of shadows here. It's a fairly diffuse little light. Anywho, you would just sort of like run around and tweak settings until you found something that you were happy with. The other thing that I should do is switch, real quick, I'm going to switch this to a Arnold material, just an Arnold standard surface. I'll rename this skin text, and I need to relink my texture, which I'm just going to be lazy and do in my Hypershade. So if I go up to the Textures tab here, you should see the file too. This is my PSD file. If I just grab this, find my skin text, I just middle mouse button and drag this onto color, and it'll automatically link that up for me. I should have totally saved that as a non-PSD, but it's a PSD for now, for better or worse. And you can see that now it's a little bit more shiny and plastic and quite awkward looking in my opinion. But anywho, so grab this, and I might actually just, there's no way in heck that is that shiny. I'll just tweak the roughness ever so slightly. I also don't need to render this entire frame every time I do things, so I'll just be like, hey, maybe you're a little bit rougher, and I'll make the diffuse maybe also a little bit rougher. You can fiddle with the settings to your heart's content. I'm just sort of doing something. Cool. And then this is also light from outside, so I might tweak the color and make it like ever so slightly. Right now it's pretty overcast, so I'll make it like barely blue at all. Like just ever so tiniest hint of blue into that light. And then the other thing that I might do is, partly because the shadow is like just grossly gross, which sometimes it will be. I mean, like if your actual shading in the room is that gross, it will totally look gross. Like it's okay to have really dark shadows if that's what your lighting is doing. In this case, I don't think it's like needs to be quite as aggressive. So I'm going to add in another light. Just another area light. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. Fish tanks. And I'm just going to wander back into my perspective camera for a sec again. Drag this over here, and my fish tanks are like, the light's kind of up here a little bit. Strictly speaking, the light's also pointing downwards, but we're gonna just ignore that for the time being. Run back into my render cam, pull up Arnold render view, start that render. Alright, and I will literally just render this person. Alright, so I'm gonna grab this, and I'll make this like aggressively blue, because the fish tanks are actually pretty much that color of blue. And then I'll just jack up the intensity so I can see what this light is even doing in my scene. So in this case, I might maybe shift it up ever so slightly. It's definitely not that intense of a light, so I will totally need to take this down, especially when I make it not blue. That's gonna, like, once I make this, I might do it maybe like that-ish. And I'm gonna, again, take that intensity way the heck down, because you actually can't really see any of that light super much in the scene itself. So, yeah. Next thing I'm gonna do is just add in, it still feels like a really, like, kind of grossly dark shadow. So I'm just gonna run in and add yet another area light, shockingly, in case you can't tell that I like area lights. And I'll just rotate this one, basically just being straight down. -90 apparently. And I'll just be like, yay, light. I'll probably end up moving that somewhere not exactly 90 degrees, but for now. For now, let's see what we have. Alright, and you can see that it's getting a little bit less obscenely washed out now. So what I might do is actually just come over here. What happens if I switch to my perspective? Ooh, nice, okay. Yeah, so I'll just like run over to my perspective view, and I can just sort of shift this around a little bit. You'll notice that if I do actually scale my light, it changes like the way the light reflects on the object, which is something that should really be done with the material settings and not by scaling the light. So I still force of habit. I'm so used to like just randomly scaling objects. Excuse me. But yeah. So I'm just gonna say like maybe something like this isn't terrible. I still feel like my object material is a little weird, where it's like still this whole thing needs to be like a little bit rougher, maybe. It feels a little bit much. What if I just grab a plastic preset? It doesn't feel like an unreasonable thing to do. Just, okay, cool. That's pretty much what I had before, more or less. I just, without diffuse roughness. Yeah, so I just grabbed a plastic preset and it kind of maybe makes it feel a little bit more plasticky. Still, I don't know. I like it shiny, but that doesn't even make sense. So anyway, we're gonna run with this for now. Alright, so now that I have this lighting, I actually feel like this might be a wee bit excessive. Take that down slightly, and then maybe make this like a 5. And I actually feel like it should be lighter, maybe like 7. Cool. Something like that doesn't feel like totally terrible to me. So you basically just keep going through and like adding, like tweaking your lighting until it kind of looked, I guess, how you would expect it to look. So like if I hit all those props, you can see that this is like basically how it would be rendered in my scene. And again, if you hide the props, you can see here that there's no shadows being cast here, which like looks like it's floating. Like it just looks really unnatural, which is why it's good to go in and block in that geometry. Because you can actually render out like just a specific shadow pass and comp that in later, and it'll basically line up with your scene. But for now, I'm going to go in and just try to line up this geometry a little bit better over here. So printer bed. So like the Pocky box lines up pretty well. I'm not terribly concerned with that. I might grab this top face and just push it down ever so slightly and kind of lines up a little better. But like this guy here, actually this is tilted in reality, which would explain why it looks terrible here, because it's not mounted properly on my printer. This is actually not like a perfect cube. So I will just cheat that. I'm just going to turn that whole thing a little bit. And I'll shift these guys over. And you can see now that matches up a little better. It's like a combination of fudging it, but also that thing is, again, very much not mounted flat on my printer for some reason. And then there's also just like a giant piece of cloth sitting here, kind of randomly. So, and that's not flat, that's just sort of there. So this one I might actually just rotate this cube and scale it, and just kind of rotate it and scale it back until it matches the shape a little bit better. So I'll grab this, and you'll also notice that this edge here is super round, so this is like an object I would definitely want to go in and smooth. I might also just cheat the crap out of this with a bevel. I just grab these two edges here and just do Control B to bevel that. And if I make that like a really large edge, you can see that it pretty much just bevels that whole area in there. It's also made a bunch of icons, but for now I'm just not going to worry about that. So if I go back into my perspective view, whoa, everything is clipping through each other because I was totally not paying attention to what I was doing there. Like this obviously should be on top of the fabric. This Pocky box is no longer sitting on this cloth. Goody. Yeah. And there's actually, I'm just gonna slash a line through my model, but there actually is, the fabric is like a little bit poofed up. I could be doing this a lot more accurately, I'm just sort of not. So this would usually be the part where I'm just like, I'm gonna go in and just fudge everything, yay. So like this box could perhaps come up a little bit, maybe over a little bit, and that still pretty much lines up with what I have there. I'm just gonna again grab these verts here and just push them over. And now is like kind of the time where I start fudging it a little bit, and I'm just like, okay, I don't necessarily care if this is like totally perfect. I'm just gonna sort of like fudge the geometry a little bit, because I mostly just sort of want shadows that fall kind of in a halfway decent place, sort of. I'm actually just going to turn this into my perspective view so I don't need to keep clicking that button. But yeah, so I don't know, that's a bad decision. I might just need to shift the Pocky box through space until it behaves as I need it to. What am I clicking on right now? So like literally just a matter of if you're winging this, it pretty much is just like kind of drag things around until they line up how you expect them to. In this case, I shifted the Pocky box down a little bit, so it's actually sitting, it's pretty much sitting on this fabric. It might actually be clipping through it a little bit. And then I just moved it through space until it does something a little bit more like what I expect it to do. And I'm also going to grab this and like push it back and maybe do this a little bit because the Pocky box was clipping through it. And I might actually just shrink all of these vertices. I'm being like really spazzy right now because this is like supposed to be just like a rough blocking of geometry. Like honestly, this would probably get me what I need. Like that Pocky box is basically sitting up against that cube there. I mean, apart from like the mild clipping that's going on, this isn't like completely horrible. You can see that I'm actually gonna scale this down a bit. But you can see like the basic lines are more or less where they should be. I'm still trying to keep everything, like, except for the pile of cloth, like, relatively rectangular, and this is still, like, basically sitting more or less where it actually is. I'm sitting next to my desk while I do this, so I can kind of, like, look at it, but just kind of fudge it until you get something that looks relatively accurate, I guess. Next thing I'm going to do is just, like, throw in, I don't think this is going to be super necessary, but I'm just going to throw in, like, a desk shape under this entire thing, and just be like, yay, it's a desk. Good. And this I might actually just go down and kind of place under. There's like little feet, so I'm not going to put it directly under it, but I'll just like throw it right there. And then just move this down so that lines up. It's like backline here, and then this shouldn't be visible. So like, yay, there's now a desk in here. And then if I wanted to, I could come back in and add something that looked like, ooh, hello. Add something that was like maybe the bottom part of this little bar in here. And this is literally just like me going through and just systematically blocking in things where shadows might possibly fall. And then that would be actually sitting somewhere probably, where is this? Holy crap. This would be somewhere like actually under here, like if it were real. So I usually try to position things like where they would be in reality, and then I'll just sort of go back a little bit and then tweak stuff so that it fits the camera view. In this case, maybe something like this isn't completely awful. I'm just going to duplicate this, rotate it 90 degrees, and now it's my vertical stick. Yay, sort of ish. It doesn't really line up all that well. It should, but it doesn't. Oh. Well, I mean, I think it would actually be... No, that stick is, like, actually back here in the real person land. So I just grab these guys and I actually can't... This is... Oh, yeah, there's, like, a joint. I don't know. Alright. It's actually really hard to see what's actually happening under here. I think that's actually... Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're just going to call that good for now. So now you can see I have, like, a little bit more stuff blocked in. I'm just going to grab this and like make it intersect down here. And then again, I think I'm fairly certain that like when I rendered this, it we'll just like see where the shadows fall, and if I need to add more stuff, I will. But I mean, so you can see that the figure actually is casting shadows like all the way over here. I might even need to add in these stupid cables, Grumble. But it's just like, you just kind of need to like go through and like do that. Now I can see, you know, I probably will need to add in like a little bit more geometry over here. But you can see, I mean, even just looking at this right now, you can see like by doing it like this, you get the camera angle like pretty accurate. It's much more believable that this would actually be sitting on the printer in terms of like the angle and the size that it's using. Like if I just tried to randomly, if I just tried to randomly position this and be like, oh, I think this kind of looks maybe accurate. Like this is absolutely not sitting correctly on the piece. So adding that block in geometry also kind of helps you line up the camera angle, which is why it's beneficial. But anyway, I'm literally just going to go through now and just sort of add in some extra geometry. I will throw in the description of this video a time when I stop just adding in random geometry into this, in case you want to fast forward ahead. Otherwise, you are welcome to hang out here with me while I twiddle around with this. I might start singing, guys. I'm literally just adding cubes. I'm not really gonna do a whole lot for like dictating what I'm doing here. So what I'm doing now is I could just like grab these guys and extrude them back, but that's going to make like weird overlapping geometry down here. It's something that I've seen a lot in assignments, so I'm actually going to like loosely explain this part, what I'm doing. So I'm actually just going to, I added an extra loop for like however deep I want these things to be. And I'm just going to delete these faces, and then basically just go through and mesh tools append to polygon all of these guys in here, and fill in the holes that way. I just find that to be the easiest way to get the geometry, and it doesn't have clipping geometry, and like that kind of stuff will cause issues rendering, so I want to avoid that if I can, and also avoid these like weird faces sticking out into the middle of nowhere. Cool, so now I have that sort of shape modeled in. So let's see what this gets me in terms of rendering. Hopefully I can be done with this, because I honestly am not a huge fan of compositing. It's kind of, I don't hate compositing, I kind of hate compositing. It's fine, compositing's alright. This was way more labor intensive than I was actually planning on getting for this. I was like, okay, cool, it'll just have like a nice shadow on the box. I'm like, nope, it's gonna put an enormous shadow across all of this geometry. Alright, so I think I actually didn't need to model all of this in. That makes me feel good. So I think what I might do is just add in, there's like a few little screws like over here, which looks like they're getting, actually, no, that's just getting hit by, what is that even getting hit by? Okay, so all of this stuff that I just added in is not being affected by the shadow of the person. And it looks like that I was actually only going to really over here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this, go into my attribute editor, hopefully, okay, no, fine. Blech. I'm going to select all of the geometry of this person, and then there should be render stats, cast shadows. I should be able to just turn that off. Okay, fine. Alright. Supposed to grab this whole figure and actually just geometry from that and just do a mesh combine. Cool, I'll delete history from that. I'll get rid of this extra group I made. Cool, so now I'll grab this and I will just do turn off receive shadows, or I'm sorry, turn off cast shadows. And now I can see exactly where the shadows from this figure are hitting. So apparently it is casting some kind of shadow right here. I'm not entirely sure. I guess it's the torch maybe? But it's hitting this and this. So I really don't need any of this. And great. Okay, so then I do apparently need to go back in and model that stupid cable, actually. Cool. Excellent. I'm just gonna go back in and model the cable then. Wow, that actually turned out to be the actual perfect width for that. I can live with that. And I'll just do, if I wanted to be like really weird about it, I could make a second circle that's slightly larger, grab this curve, and just extrude again. Maybe actually make that circle a little bit bigger. I'm being bad, I'm not labeling anything in my outliner, but I just don't care right now. And then I'm just going to make sure that these are positioned halfway reasonably, which they are very much not, which, to be fair, I should have expected. Small cable. So it's good to position these like somewhere in the real world, because like this is not going to cast appropriate shadows on this cable. Big cable. Curves. Surfaces. And I'm just going to make a layer for these so I don't accidentally keep selecting them, because I just don't like dealing with that. It's irritating. One thing I will do is reverse the direction of these so they're at least facing the right direction. And then I'll just go back and set these to be reference layers. So now I can go through and maybe position these somewhat more realistically-ish? Maybe? I could have just made a huge mistake. This is probably a bad idea to go back in and fiddle with all of these. So why is that isolated select? Alright, so it should be coming out of kind of there. And then it kind of comes up a little bit like this and goes over like that. Alright, cool, still going. Alright, so I just went in and I tweaked these so that they were a little bit more accurate, like real world for shape. And then I'm just gonna reverse these again, because it's like a peeve of mine, and I'm just gonna go to modify, convert NURBS to polys, and once I smooth those, I should have cables that look like my cables. Poly cables. All that work for like 2 stupid cables, like honestly though. Alright, so cool. I will just turn those off. And once I render this, okay, yeah, so you can see that the shadow did actually go like all the way over those bloody cables. So that is something that I would want to add in there. I forgot about that. So you also notice, like this cable isn't like lined up super fantastically. So I'm actually going to maybe run through and actually just translate that cable over ever so slightly, and now that lines up a little bit better. Right, and then this one might be slightly too large, so I'll just grab that cable and just scale it down a little bit more, and then go in and grab that curve again, and just make sure that that is on. Make sure that that is actually on the. Oh, I think I need to add these poly cables to their own group as well, because I cannot deal with selecting these every 4 seconds. So I'm just going to grab this and where are the control vertexes? Basically, I'm just trying to line these up so that they, once I comp the shadows on top, they're not like floating awkwardly in space. Because I am apparently incapable of finding this control vertex. Okay, there we go. I see. I was trying to select in a weird area. Alright, cool. So that like lines up a little bit more. I'm just going to ignore these. Like, you can get as crazy as you want with this, but in this case, I think you get the point. Add in. Usually I'll start with like a cube or something like that to just sort of block in your the perspective of your camera, and then just block in all the geometry that the stuff is going to affect. So in this case, let's see what we have here. Cool. So I'm just going to systematically turn off I'm just going to turn on and off the shadows for this again. And see what objects are actually being affected by this. So like this is definitely being affected. This, these poly cables are definitely getting hit. And it looks like these like weird little things here are as well. Affected by shadows. Alright, so like theoretically, if I turned off every other thing, none of these props here should be affected by the shadows of the figure. Right, so like this is theoretically the only thing that will actually be shown by that. Why? Weird. Alright, cool. So this is like the only stuff that my shadows really seem to be affecting. Although I do question the fact that this is not attached. I might just add that in case. Cool, so now I have this, and I'm just like, yay, awesome shadow. That's actually totally not really affected. Anyway, but yeah, so I mean, this is how you set up the scene. I'll do another video about... cat. Just came and sat on me. I'll do another video about how to actually like composite this stuff and render this a bit later.